It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I want to play a game.
Hi everybody, Yussef here from Sounds from the Grave, and today we're going to be talking about Spiral, the new film in the Saw franchise. Or is it more of a spin-off? Before we begin, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And please check out our podcast. We're on Anchor, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Now, let's dive in. Spiral stars Chris Rock, Max Minghella, and Samuel L. Jackson, and is more of a spin-off set in the Saw universe than a direct sequel. Brash detective Zeke Banks and his rookie partner take charge of a grisly investigation into murders that are eerily reminiscent of the city's gruesome past. As the mystery deepens, Zeke finds himself at the center of the killer's morbid game. So I had some relatively high expectations going into this. The Saw franchise is one of my favorites, if not my favorite horror franchise. And even though Jigsaw had been kind of a mess, Spiral had me a bit more hopeful because of its cast, as well as its effort to distance itself from the overarching plot of the Saw films while still retaining its identity. Unfortunately, I ultimately left the theater disappointed. There were a lot of good ideas and some excellent moments, but the execution was just lacking, and it left me unsure of the franchise's future following the announcement of a sequel already underway. Let's talk about the aspects of the film I did enjoy. This movie has a great atmosphere. It blends the grimy and dirty look of the previous films with a new, oppressive, blistering feel to the movie. The film itself is set in the middle of summer, and you can just feel how uncomfortable and hot all the characters must be feeling. They're all constantly sweating, and there's almost always some sort of fan or other cooling device in a scene. It gave the film an interesting look that hadn't really been done before in any of the previous entries. One of my other favorite aspects were the traps featured in the film. They were mostly simplistic, but they were also brutal, and I felt that Jigsaw had been lacking in the brutality of the traps, but Spiral upped the ante. A particular standout for me was a trap that I call tongue-tied, where a victim's tongue was placed in a hanging vise and they had to rip their own tongue out in order to escape. It was absolutely chilling imagery. Although there were a small amount of traps themselves, they were well executed and some of the most violent ones we had seen in the franchise. I will also give props to the film for feeling modern in the current political climate, but also ambiguous enough where the message will resonate in the future. Without spoiling too much, it delves into issues with racism, corruption, and police brutality, things that are all too real in our current times. Now, for the aspects I didn't particularly like. The acting was passable, except for Chris Rock himself, unfortunately. There were certain moments where he would act over the top in scenes that were meant to be more subdued, but then not acting enough in the scenes that were meant to have more of an impact. It was a very inconsistent performance, and it really bogged the movie down since it does spend a good chunk of time on his character. Overall, his character was relatively well written, but the performance just wasn't there. My other issue, and this was definitely my biggest issue with the film, was the plot itself. The previous entries could be somewhat predictable, but every once in a while they would completely blindside you and throw you for a loop. The plot in Spiral, however, was entirely predictable, and as soon as a certain character appeared, you knew what role they played in the story, so the twist was completely ineffective. The ending itself was also a big point of contention for me. The ending left a lot desired, and I think if they had spent a bit more time in the writer's room and really ironed out the ending, it would have been a lot more satisfying. So those are my thoughts on Spiral. Although there were some nice moments and some really excellent traps, the inconsistent acting and the predictable plot just really affected the film. Because of that, I would have to give Spiral a 6 out of 10. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm curious to know, what were your thoughts on Spiral? Drop it in the comments or reach out to us on all our socials, because I'm really curious to see what other people thought of this film. But for now, I bid you goodbye, and I will catch you on the next video and or podcast episode, whichever one decides to release first. Stay spooky, my friends.